Serious, what's the scariest experience you have been through? My grandma died from Alzheimer's, and have a fear my mother will have it one day. I was house sitting for my parents, and when they got back from their vacation my mom was sitting on the couch, and fell asleep at like 2 AM. I gently woke her up, and asked if she would like to go to bed, or if she wanted to just sleep there, and she was so out of it, like where am I? Where is my room again? Then stumbled off to fall asleep in bed. That moment was terrifying for me. She is 100% mentally okay, and don't know if she will ever get Alzheimer's, but seeing a level of mental sluggishness that reminded me of my grandmother was terrifying. The only other thing I can think of was the acceptance that I needed help, and there was going to be a very long road ahead of me that was likely going to be horrible. I had a few suicide attempts and ECT. Attempting suicide wasn't really scary. Accepting that I didn't want to die and needed help was. Lived in a second-story apartment for a few years. Was woken up around 2 AM one morning to slamming on my door and someone yelling, "Fire." When I opened the door, everything was bright orange and I could hear the very loud crackling of burning wood. Thought it was either my apartment or the apartment under mine that was on fire, and my first reaction was to find my cat and get her out. Halfway through grabbing her, I realized I may have been putting myself in serious danger and thought I'd have to escape off the balcony. Thankfully, for me, it was the apartment across from mine that was on fire, so I was able to get downstairs and to safety with my cat. The next hour or so was a completely different kind of scary as I crossed my fingers the fire wouldn't spread to my apartment. It didn't, but 2 buildings were destroyed, 14 residents were displaced, 2 cats lost their lives, and a firefighter was hospitalized. I was 17, was coming home from my GF at the times, house around 3 or 4 in the AM. I live in an apartment and would regularly jump my backyard fence, climb up to the 2nd floor, and come down the stairs to climb through my window on the 1st floor. I get to the fence, hear a car screeching its tires. I get to the top of the fence, and as I turn my back to land I hear footsteps running towards where I am. I'm caught off guard, because no one should be back here at this time. I'll land and turn around to see who it is. It's a neighbor who lives in the building. A 32-year-old gangster cholo/frequent drug user. I felt relief, because we were on decent terms and he knew who I was growing up. But he has a Uzi in his hand. He half points it at me, shaking as he does so. I nearly myself, but he lowers it, realizing who I'm as I say, "What's up?" He was obviously on drugs. Meth was his poison and I could tell by the way he was talking. He asked me to hold the gun so he can take a piss, pushing it into my chest as he did so. I could feel him shaking from adrenaline/drugs. I look and it's just cold hard steel in the shape of a gun. It looked like death. I felt like I didn't have a choice. I was stuck for a second, but I managed to take a step back, raise my hands, and say, "Nah bro, I can't." He says, "It's all good. Use her shirt to hold it just real quick so he can piss." I repeat, "Nah, I can't. Put it on the floor and do what you gotta do. I'll keep watch." He proceeds to take a piss, turning my way every other second because his loaded gun is on the floor between us. I look the other way, try not to make him any more nervous. Look into the sky and hear a helicopter approaching. It's low and its searchlight is scanning the area. I tell him, "Yo, I gotta go." He asks if I have keys to the backyard door. I nervously pull them out and say, "Yeah, I do." "Let's go." Though I hurriedly walk/run to the door, open it for us. He lives on the 1st floor as well, and we go opposite ways. A huge relief. I have to jump through my window still. I can barely manage to get the screen off because I'm shaking so much. I manage to get in 10 seconds later and am shaking/nervous from what just happened. I wash my face, change my clothes, get ready for bed, and smoke a few bowls of herb to calm down. I thought it was a good idea, so I put Adult Swim on and try to relax and drift to sleep. 20 minutes later, as I'm drifting off into sleep, a red laser is being pointed through my curtains. I nearly myself as my bed was visible and the dot seemed like it was shaky and searching. I was effing terrified. My only thought was he went and got more high. Thought about what happened and decided I saw too much. I'm literally hugging my wall, standing on my bed trying to avoid the laser beam. I thought I was dead. Then the light shuts off and flicks on and off a couple times, and I notice the angle isn't floor level. It's coming in from the second floor. A neighbor girl I used to talk to had 2 younger sisters and their window was across from mine, but on the second floor. They were shining a laser in my room. Most likely they saw me jumping into my room and decided it was a good effing idea that night to shine a laser beam into my room. I was pissed and called her / sent her a few texts blowing up about them shining a laser into my room that late at night. She understood without me having to explain, and they stopped immediately. But damn the thoughts that were running through my head point. I didn't know whether to laugh or to cry about the situation. My mother tried to kill me. I was 17, and I'm currently no contact with her. I was kicked out at 14, and we have had a really unstable relationship since I was about 10. We were arguing over food, and she was already mad about her boyfriend going on holiday with his friend. She took my phone from my hands and put it in her room upstairs. I asked for my phone back multiple times as I had bought it myself and paid for everything to do with it. She kept refusing and told her boyfriend to not give me my phone back. I sat at the top of the stairs and said I'm not moving till I get my phone back. She shoved me backwards and put her forearm on my throat with her whole weight behind it. My mother is not a light woman, weighing in at around 300 pounds at 5 feet 2. I can still remember her whispering in my ear that she could kill me and get away with it. My vision started going black at the edges and I genuinely thought I was going to die. Pushing her off did not work, and I was starting to lose consciousness, so I tried to punch her. It was a feeble slap against her side, but it was enough. She threw me down the stairs and said I was attacking her. She grabbed my throat with her nails and shoved me towards the living room. The next 2 hours were filled with her telling me how much she hated me and wished she had gotten an abortion. I was punched multiple times and told that I'd never be believed, that her boyfriend and his best mate would vouch for her and say I attacked her, and she acted in self-defense. I cried myself to sleep, and I'm shaking as I write this now. Choking someone is the most unforgivable of domestic violence and is a direct precursor to murder. School shooting. I was a junior in high school and a recent transfer student who got expelled at another school started shooting in the commons. Everyone hangs out in the commons before school, so it was super crowded and dangerous. I remember hearing the first shot and thought a table collapsed. No one even batted an eye. My orchestra teacher came out of his office and was immediately suspicious and said, "You guys, what was that?" Then a few seconds later, the second bang. We knew then what was happening. I happened to be in the orchestra room right next to the commons, and we had an exit that lead to the parking lot. But in school they teach you, whenever there's an emergency, to hide in a corner. I remember trying to hide in a practice room, but it was locked. Then my friends and I ducked under a piano and students starting swarming in the room from the commons. At that point our orchestra teacher said go and had us run out the exit instead. It was a brave decision he made, and running to our cars was the longest run of my life. I remember ducking as I ran because I thought there might be other shooters aiming for us runners. As I ran I realized I didn't even have my car keys or phone and didn't know where to go. Luckily we made it to the back of the parking lot and met up with a few friends and crammed 6 of us in a 4-seater. I'll never forget the faces of my peers around me scarred with fear, and I'll never forget legitimately thinking I might die that day after aimlessly driving and making phone calls to our parents with one phone. We were able to watch the news and saw that there was no one injured. It turns out our government teacher bravely tackled the shooter to the ground. He was known throughout the state and even threw a pitch for the Mariners game. I'm very grateful it didn't end how most shootings do. The most scariest thing that instantly comes into my mind is about my son who was at that time 1 year old. He was lying/sleeping on the couch next to me, and his mother was sleeping too, at his feet. For some reason I've had a bad feeling, and as I've touched his forehead it was ice cold, even though he was sweating. Cold sweat. In the moment I realized that this is going to be serious. He had an epileptic cramp, usually that from my brother, who has heavy epilepsy, but at this time it caught me off guard. All my logic and my brain in general were in panic mode. I grabbed him, holding him close to me, waking his mother up, and we both were in a state of fear and panic we've never experienced before. As he cramped up I tried to call the ambulance, and for some reason between all the crying and stuttering I could give them the proper details. After I hung up he cramped so hard that he got all stiff looking with big dead eyes to the ceiling, and in the next moment his body relaxed. I mean not relax, but became like jelly. He was unconscious, but we've thought he had died at that moment as there no life signs whatsoever. Eyes closed and I had a hard time holding him as his body was like running out of my arms. I really hope to never have such a moment again in my life. End of story. Short version. Ambulance came and I went with him to the hospital. Like mentioned before, he had a cramp, fell unconscious, and like this, we knew that he had, sounds ironic, a mild form of epilepsy. He's now 9 years old. Perfectly fine. No more epilepsy. Last cramp was when there was like 5-ish, or at least no signs. That can be detected by neurologists. I wish no one the feeling that we've had that night. I was leaving work late at night, around 2 or 3 am, for a 1.5 hour drive back home. The town I was working in had lots of deer around, and as I was leaving town, there was a deer that was at the side of the road trying to decide whether or not it was going to go. I slowed down to well below the speed limit, 25-30 miles per hour. It looked like the deer was backing off, so I sped up slightly, up to 40 or 45, and then at the last split second, right as I crossed the deer's path, it jumps into the road. This motherfucker. I hit the brakes and lost control of the wheel. My car flipped halfway up, and I was convinced at that moment I was about to have a very bad, possibly fatal accident. But it came back down, and I was facing the opposite direction in the other lane. Had anything had been just slightly different, stiff breeze, an oncoming truck, to lane road, a roncha farting in the wind, I would have probably been dead. If the car finished its roll, it would have been down a fairly steep grade off the side of the road. There would have been no way I would have walked away from that. Stupid effing deer. That's actually the second scariest thing, but it's one I'm able to deal with. First scariest thing was the day we brought my newborn son home from the hospital. His body temperature dropped to a frightening level. He wasn't drinking his bottle, couldn't rouse him. We took him to the hospital in our town and they couldn't do anything for him. No pediatric unit. He had to be life flighted into the next city over to a children's hospital. My in-laws came and picked my wife and I up, and that had to be the longest, most fear-inducing drive I've ever taken. We get him to the hospital, and they tried to do a ref and spinal tap on him, and they couldn't do it. 2 attempts. We could tell he was crying from the pain, and it still breaks my heart. It still angers me and makes me feel like I let him down. The doctors were insistent they needed to do it, and we agreed to it, and I'll never let myself down for that. After that, the only thing they did was give him fluids and put him under a heat lamp, and we waited. I didn't sleep at all that night. His temp came back up. He started eating again. To this day, we don't know what happened other than maybe the temperature in our house was too low. 75. It was late summer in Texas, but we turned the ack off for the rest of the year and still kept him bundled up. I was taking his temperature at least 4 or 5 times a day for his first 6 months. He was a little underweight when he was born, maybe a week or so early, but nothing terrible. Nowadays, kid is beating all of his milestones and, at 1, looks like a 2.5-year-old in size. Tall kid, gaining good weight, can't fit in any of his clothes. Lol. That fear, though, I've never felt a level of fear like that before. That was some dark, heavy sh that I can't describe.